happens during stretching. A number of years ago, I asked the great yoga master B.K.S. Iyengar what he thought was the key to mastering yoga. In response, he held up one hand and pointing to each of the different surfaces of his fingers, the insides, the outsides, front and back, he said, you must balance all the energies in each part of the body. So that is one of the aims of stretching in yoga, to find a nice balance and alignment of energy. Not just the physical aspect of stretching the body. Okay? So it is to align the energy and hopefully to align that energy to the Supreme. Okay? And the Sanskrit word Ata means sun/moon and implies a balance of sun and moon, heat and cold, yin and yang. So that's what we want to achieve in yoga through stretching. Viewed in this way, Mr. Iyengar's statement captures the essence of Hatha Yoga. Bones form stable joints such as the sacroiliac joint, held together by thick stout ligaments. So ligaments you can think of as an extension of bone, but a little softer tissue. Okay, it is not as rigid as bone, but you can think of it as an extension of bone, fibrous tissue which connects one bone to another. Okay? And ligaments allow minimum or limited joint mobility, because the main purpose of ligament is to give you stability from bone to bone. So not much movement takes place around the bones, around the ligaments. On the other hand, bones forming shoulder joint. Now he is talking about hip joint as well as the shoulder joint. The hip joint and the shoulder joint, they are the major joints of the body. The hip joint is a deep ball and socket joint, and its very nature gives more stability, whereas the shoulder joint is a little shallower ball and socket joint, so more mobility takes place around the shoulder joint. Okay? On the other hand, bones forming the shoulder joint are connected by much thinner and more malleable ligaments. So around the hip joint, the ligaments are stout. Okay, not so much of, you can move around a lot around the hips, but stability is a major factor in the hip joint, the ligaments of the hip joint. Whereas in the shoulder joint, the ligaments are a little more delicate, so they allow for more movement. Finally, there are muscles that, so first he talked about ligaments. So ligaments are mainly to provide stability. Usually we do not use ligaments to create flexibility in yoga. What we use mainly are muscles surrounding the joints. The muscles have a little much more freedom to stretch and contract and all that, whereas the ligaments cannot expand and lengthen and contract. They are not meant to do that. So it's the muscles that we manipulate in yoga for stretching. So finally, there are muscles that surround the joint. The muscles surrounding the joint are called the muscle stabilizers because they stabilize the joint. Contracting muscles not only produce movement but also stabilize joints. So the two main purposes of contracting a muscle are for stabilizing and for movement, for shortening and all that. Okay. The contractile state of a muscle affects the mobility of the joint. Tight muscles limit joint mobility, relaxed muscles increase it. Okay. Stretching lengthens the muscle stabilizers of a specific joint, allowing for greater range of movement. So when a muscle stretches, you can move it more. It moves away from the joint. The muscles attached to the joint, when the muscles lengthen, you are able to move freely. It gives you some flexibility and it gives you what is called ROM, range of motion. Practicing yoga lengthens muscles surrounding multiple joints and increases ROM for the entire body. Okay. So that's the purpose of stretching. Muscle lengthening as well as to increase your range of mobility or range of motion. Now what could be the factors that could limit you from doing a particular posture? Okay. Limitations in ability to perform a different given yoga pose can result from any of the factors determining joint mobility and stability, including the muscle's contractile state and length or tightness of the capsule or capsulo-ligamentous structures and bone shape. So bone shape can be one factor that can limit you from doing a particular pose. Then muscle stiffness or tightness can also inhibit your ROM or your flexibility. Then also he says tightness of the ligamentous structures. If your ligaments are very tight, that could restrict you from doing a certain asana. So bone, muscle and ligament. Ligament we call it capsulo-ligamentous structure. Okay, so the ligaments that hold one bone to another. So these are the three factors: bone, muscle and ligament, which can affect your shape of bone, which can affect your flexibility and mobility. Now bone shape you cannot change, alva. You cannot change the shape of your bone. So that factor you can't, you have to just accept it. Okay. Once bone shape cannot change once you have grown up, once your growth period is over. Once you have finished your puberty or into your late teens and early 20s, that's when your bone shape is fixed. Okay?
How do bone shapes change? Like what is the difference in two people?
No, from children, that depends on genetics.
Okay.
Genetics.
How could it be different? Like
one person has a long thigh bone, another's thigh bone is short.
Or like that?
Yeah, this is length of the bone itself. And
Is
then hip bone,
curvature?
for many people the hip bone protruding and all that. So, and as compared to square hips or rectangular hips like a box, the hip bone can be protruding. So these are factors, right?
So when we are parents, for example, for small children, can we influence of the, some way of the length of the children help?
Length of children.
Like an external way can do some shaping the body, like through some exercise.
But what will definitely help you is when you improve the child's posture. See, most of the time we are like this.
Their tendency, yes.
Now suddenly in the yoga class we are forced to sit upright. So making yoga a part of your lifestyle, when you start doing yoga regularly, you will start walking upright also. So those things can be done, but generally whatever is programmed inside your DNA as to how tall you will be and the length of your bones, everything is programmed, pre-programmed. So that does not change. Through yoga, we cannot use a belt and stretch the body more. So, but definitely muscles can lengthen, and that will give you a increased, a good posture. So most of the time, even the cavemen, they were all like this, right? So the spine had terribly rounded. So that we can definitely fix. Okay.
Is that ideal to have like cavemen and even monkeys have their spine always?
That is their thing, because I think they needed longer arms and all that to grab onto trees. So that was their natural gait. But our natural gait is to be upright. Yeah. Okay. So bone shape, once the growth plates are closed, those two ends of the long bones we saw in the chapter on bones. So once those growth ends, they close, and the middle part of the bone, the the diaphysis, all that once it closes, no more growth takes place. Then coming to the next factor, ligamentous structures, like we just saw now, ligament, minimum limited movement. Okay, since bone shape cannot be changed and ligament length should not be changed. Why should ligament length not be changed? Because ligaments are meant for stability. They are not meant to be stretched, pulled and pushed. Okay, so that's exactly what you said yesterday, the ligament tear and all that. If you manipulate too much, it will lead to injury. So the only thing we can play around with and manipulate are the muscles. Okay, so that is what we are going to talk about. And muscles, skeletal, we are now talking about voluntary muscles, just remember that. Okay, so you cannot control your heart muscle and all that. So skeletal muscles, they are under the conscious influence of the nervous system. So there is a very close interaction between skeletal muscles, voluntary muscles and the nervous system. Which means what? That you can control. Okay. So it would be fair enough to say that by practicing stretching and all that in yoga, it would also make you a little more intelligent. Because I'm just saying, your mind is active, right? So you're using your nervous system and you're trying to stretch safely, yet get a good length of muscle. So there is a lot of nervous system, which the interaction between the muscular and nervous system is very close.
Yeah, it's actually proved that not just yoga, just playing a sport regularly makes you more active mentally and
Yes.
keeps you sharp.
Connection between mind and muscle is stronger.
Yes. So understanding biomechanical processes and interactions is one key to balancing the forces and energy. So we are looking at balancing forces, we are looking at balancing energy, increasing flexibility, also increasing the strength and making ourselves mentally sharper, more aware. So these are all the benefits of stretching. And each joint is surrounded by muscles that are grouped according to the movement they produce while contracting or relaxing. So two main things that you need to know is agonist muscle and antagonist muscle. Okay, so agonist muscle is the one that we target. And when we target a particular muscle, there is an opposing muscle that also works. So that is called the antagonist muscle. So there is an interplay between these opposing muscles, seemingly opposing, but the function, the stretch that they bring about, they have to work together to bring about a certain length of muscle. Working in concert, these various muscles act to balance energies in each part of the body. So the antagonist and the agonist muscles are required to balance the energies in the body. Just like your yin and yang, sun and moon. So again he is repeating what factors which affect mobility, bone shape, the ligamentous, capsulo-ligamentous structures he calls it, and the muscles that surround the joint. Capsulo-ligamentous structures, they fasten bones to one another, also contribute to determining joint mobility and mainly stability. So these ligaments, like I said in the beginning, they are like extensions of your bone and they connect one bone to the other. So you see the second picture where he is doing a forward bend on the next page, 79. Okay, so there is a muscle called the psoas muscle. Okay. So the psoas muscle is here. It is originating in the lower part of your spine and it attaches to the hip, to the pelvis. So this is a big muscle which helps you to do your forward bends. Okay, so the psoas muscle, very roughly, it originates from the lower back and then it comes round the front and attaches to your hip. So when you have to do a forward bend, that is the muscle, that big muscle that is working. Okay, so when this person is doing the forward bend, the psoas, what the psoas does is, it tilts your hip forward to do a forward bend. Okay, and on page 79, the second picture. Page 79. Okay, so that psoas muscle tilts the hip forward. This action shows the origin of the, draws the origin of the hamstring. Now where is the hamstring in this picture? Page 79. Where is the hamstring? I am on page 79.
Here.
The pictures are it.
Pictures are different from
It is for us, it's on 80. Page 80.
Okay, so it's, I am on the page what is stretching.
The hamstring.
back side of
So,
the
Quads
if
and
you see,
hamstrings
this is
are
hamstring, okay. So this is hamstring. Origin of the hamstring will be where?
On the hip.
So usually the origin will be towards the midline of proximal end of the body, means towards the crown side of the head. So this is the origin of the hamstring, and this is called the, every muscle has 2 points, okay, one origin and one insertion. So the place from where the muscle originates is called the origin, and from here the fibers get attached to this point, which is called the insertion. Okay, so in a forward bend, when the psoas muscle tilts your hip forward, this draws the origin of the hamstring muscle at the back of the pelvis upwards. So the origin of the pelvis goes up, which means what? The origin of the hamstring goes away from the insertion of the hamstring, which causes a stretch of the hamstring in your forward bend. So when the 2 points of that muscle, origin and insertion, move away from each other, that causes a muscle stretch. Okay? Then along with that, what is happening? So already you have 2 muscles we talked about. The psoas muscle, which originates at your lower lumbar spine, and it runs round the front and attaches to your hip. So that tilts your hip forward when you are doing Padahastasana. That is one muscle. Another muscle is the hamstring, back of the leg. So the hamstring becomes longer because the origin moves away from the insertion of the muscle. Third muscle is the quadricep, that is tightening or contracting. And by tightening that, your knee will straighten. So these are 3 muscles which are working together to give you a good forward bend. Okay? So when apart from, I am not talking about names of muscles here, but what I am trying to say is two things. A group of muscles are required to do a particular posture in tandem, and the second point is when the origin of the muscle moves away from the insertion of the muscle, that's when you get a lengthening of the muscle. Muscle lengthening is muscle stretch, they are the same. Okay? Now in the picture above, when you are doing Garudasana, arms, upper body only. So what is happening in that? The front of the chest, there is a big muscle called the pectoralis major. When you do bicep curls, whenever you bring your arm in front, we saw that in a few chapters back, when you bring your arm in front, the bicep, the chest muscle also tightens, it develops more. Okay, so that muscle is called the pectoralis major. It draws the humerus towards the midline of the body. This action moves the insertion of the supraspinatus muscle on the head of the humerus away from its origin on the body of the scapula. Better in the colored picture. Pectoralis major draws the humerus. So this chest muscle, it pulls your arm bone away from the shoulder joint. So it pulls. So that is one muscle which is working when you are doing Garudasana. It moves the insertion of the supraspinatus muscle on the head of the humerus away from the origin at the body of the scapula. Okay, so if you come closer, you can see this picture. This is what he calls that supraspinatus muscle. So when you are squeezing your arms in Garudasana, yes, so this muscle gets pulled away from its origin. The origin of the supraspinatus muscle is on the body of the scapula. You know what the scapula is, right? A triangular flat bone on your, if you keep your hand on your back, you have two flat muscles, triangular shape, which are called the shoulder blades. Shoulder blade is called anatomically the scapula. Now on the scapula you have a flat broad muscle called the supraspinatus. Now when you do your Garudasana, what is happening here? This supraspinatus muscle, it is originating in the scapula. It is sitting on the body of the scapula and it is attached to this upper arm bone. So it gets pulled away from its origin. So that is what is happening when you are doing eagle arms. And along with that, because the pectoralis is contracting, that further draws the supraspinatus muscle away from its origin. So your upper back is stretching also. Now along with that, there is another muscle called the rhomboid. Now the rhomboid draws the body of the scapula towards the spine in the midline of the back. This action moves the origin. So one more muscle. So there are three muscles for Garudasana. Front of the chest, pectoralis major. Then you have that supraspinatus muscle which is sitting attached to your scapula, and it originates in the scapula and comes across to the front to the arm bone, humerus. Then there is a third broad muscle on your upper back called the rhomboid. So the rhomboids work to bring your arms in front like this, stretching the back muscles. So these are three muscles that work like in your hamstring or in your leg area where you had three muscles. Upper body also you have another corresponding set of muscles which help you to do the posture. So just remember this very clearly, no confusions. When the origin of a muscle moves away from its insertion, it causes a stretch. Can you think, if you imagine, it's not difficult. You have a clothesline, okay? So clothesline is like this. It is attached to two poles. So when this, or think of rubber band, which you attach with two nails. So this is like one, you attach a rubber band. So when you pull the string, this moves away from this end, causing a stretch. So when the two ends get pulled apart, they get a stretch. So every muscle always has a point of origin and a point of insertion. And point of origin will be where? For any muscle in the body.
For the spine.
Towards the proximal end or towards the point of, towards a major joint. And it will go to the distal end, towards a limb. Okay, so proximal will actually more towards the point of origin. Now, so for the arm bone, for the bicep, the origin will be here, the insertion will be here. This cannot be the origin. The more stable joint will be from where the place from where the muscle originates. Okay. Then I am coming to, for me, page 80 is moving origins and insertions. Moving origins, so this is the page 80 for me. Next is that. What happens when you bend the knee? It releases the origin of the main calf muscle. So if your calf muscle is tight and you want to do a straightening of the leg, don't straighten the leg immediately. First you bend the knee. So when you bend the knee, the calf muscle will relax. And this allows its insertion on the heel bone. So where is the calf muscle originating here? The calf muscle is originating here at this point. And where is it attached or inserted? It is at the heel bone. So when you bend the knee, you are able to move the heel bone little more forward. Freedom of movement will be there. Once you move the heel bone or the attachment of the calf muscle further forward, then you can straighten the leg. By bending the knee, you are able to release the origin of the calf muscle. Release means what? give it a little relaxation. Don't immediately pull the leg or don't immediately pull the calf. Slightly bend the knee like we did last week in Hanumanasana. I kept insisting don't straighten that front leg. The knee, if you keep it bent, then that will release the calf muscle where it is so tight, and then you slide your heel forward. Then you see that you notice that it's easier to straighten the knee. So which means at the area of attachment you are able to stretch from that point towards the origin. Now once the calf muscle is relaxed, so it is not just calf muscle, you are also using little bit your arms to straighten the leg. No matter how much we try not to use the arms, there is some arm, we are doing some pulling, right? So once the calf muscles are relaxed, you bend the elbows to tilt the foot backwards. You bend your elbows to pull the foot in. Pulling the foot in is called what? Dorsiflexion. Okay? And hold it in this position. This fixes the insertion of the calf muscle at a point further away from the origin. So when you pull the foot in, this it stretches the heel area, the insertion of the calf. So just by doing these little modifications, first what you did, you bent the knee to release the origin of the calf muscle. Then next step, you bent your elbows. That will give you a stretch to the insertion of the calf muscle, so you are able to slide the heel away from you. And then third step is what? Hands continue to grip the feet while the biceps and the brachialis muscles remain active. So final step, when you are straightening the leg, you are using your biceps also. Okay? And further holding the foot in the tilted back or dorsiflexed position. So you are using bending of knee, then you are using your elbows, you are using your biceps, then finally you are tightening your quadriceps to straighten the knee. Bending the knee releases the insertion of the hamstring on the lower leg, the psoas muscle. Then along with that you have your psoas muscle also, which is attached to your lower back. So that will tilt your hip forward and you will be able to hold your foot and you will be able to straighten the leg also. Page 81. These images illustrate how Janu Shirshasana combines movements of various major joints. So many joints: ankle joint, knee joint, hip joint, elbow, and those of the spine. So many muscles required. Step-by-step process to achieve the pose, to create length in the muscle of the back of the body. Okay. Now coming to physiology of stretching. So remember, every forward bend, the hip, the pelvis has to tilt forward, and every back bend, the hip will go back. Okay. So just see on page 68. So page 68, he is doing that scorpion pose, no? It is called hip extension. Notice the direction of the arrow. Okay, so that is called that is how the hip moves backwards. Posterior tilt of the pelvis, it is called. Okay, so to get that stretch, no, in the front of the body, your hip has to be in extension, which means your pelvis has to move posteriorly. Your hip has to move backwards for you to be able to lift your chest. So that is called a pelvic posterior tilt. Whereas in the next page 69, you see that forward bend which he is doing, how the hip goes forward and downwards. This picture, standing forward bend. Notice how that whole hip is going forward and downwards for you to be able to touch the toe. So that is called the pelvic anterior tilt. Anterior means more forward, posterior means backward. So when you do back bend chakrasana and all today, your hip has to move back for your chest to lift. Okay. So these are two important terms, anterior, and whenever you are doing a forward bend, it's an anterior tilt of the pelvis. That you can think, right? Posterior tilt of pelvis is when you are doing any back bend, or commonly, actually you should be saying back extension, not back bend. It's actually a stretch, no? So it's not a bend, it's a stretch. Yeah. Coming to physiology of stretching. So you may be asked a question, what are the sequence of events and the muscles involved when you are doing Janu Shirshasana or Paschimottanasana or any seated standing forward bend or like a Garudasana. So these are, he has listed out the muscles. So possible question.
Janu Shirshasana, our scapula is also working, right? Because we are extending
A
our
little bit
hands
arm,
out.
yes, little bit is there.
Probably
Chest muscle is being squeezed. Arms you are using this also. You are using back muscle. Full back muscle you are using for Janu Shirshasana. Full spinal muscle is used from the bottom to the yeah. See the whole band of muscles or the whole muscle group along the spine. In this colored picture you can see. This whole band of muscle groups is working when you bend forward. Okay, physiology of stretching. Musculoskeletal biomechanics are under our conscious control. So when we want to straighten the knee, the brain signals the quadriceps to contract and the knee straightens, stretching the hamstrings. So when you want to straighten the knee, you will have to tighten this. So mentally I am telling, or I am using my nervous system to tighten the quadricep, but at the same time the back becomes long. It relaxes and it becomes longer, the hamstring. Okay? This action triggers a chain of physiological responses that take place without our conscious awareness. Receptors within the joints and muscles detect movement and changes in muscle tension and length. These receptors signal the central nervous system, which respond by regulating contractile states of muscles, in turn affecting ROM of a given joint. Okay. So in this way, conscious biomechanical actions influence unconscious physiological responses. Moving the body into a yoga posture initiates a cascade of biomechanical and physiological events. Okay. Now he's talking about, also he will be talking about what are the different pathways from the spinal cord to the muscles. Now first he says, what are the different types of stretches? Okay, we saw this yesterday also. Just to recapitulate, first you have your ballistic stretching. This type of stretching uses jumping type actions to stretch the target muscle groups. Vinyasa flow series are an example of ballistic type of stretching. Okay, I wouldn't totally agree with it because we are not doing a lot of jumping. Okay, few jumps are there, but while we are moving through the flow, we are just transitioning. I wouldn't call it a very jumpy or jerky movements. This method is useful, but it is useful to reset muscle lengths You have noticed, right, when you are doing a full-on vinyasa class, you are able to stretch much more than you would at resting state.
Right.
So the purpose is achieved. Practicing sun salutations in the morning is an example of this. Okay, so the original vinyasa is the Surya Namaskar. The Surya Namaskar is the original flow. Okay. Why is it the original vinyasa? Because with each inhalation you are doing one posture, with each exhalation you are doing another posture. And you are placing yourself on the mat in a particular position. To place something in a particular place is called vinyasa also. It's not just movement with breath, but a specific positioning of the body in space. Okay, so that also refers to vinyasa.
What is the literal meaning of that term?
That only, it means that to place something in a particular position, that is, I'll tell you the exact definition, but that's what it means. Then later comes breath and movement and flow and all that. See, vinyasa is a Sanskrit word. Okay, you can even write it down, it's interesting. Formed by linking two words together, nyasa means to place. Nyasa means to place, and vi means in a special or sacred way. Hence, vinyasa means to place something in a sacred and special way. A common definition, this is one definition, Sanskrit, if you break down the words nyasa and vi. Nyasa means to place, ashte. Vi means in a special or sacred way. That is one definition, literal meaning. The common definition is breath synchronized with movement. Okay, and if you kind of think a little deeper, breath with movement, but remember it is conscious breath with movement. So the moment you say conscious breath with movement, mind, nervous system. So you are basically using mind, nervous system, then your breath and your body. Annamaya kosha, pranamaya kosha and manomaya kosha. So you are literally taking care of the superficial layers, the yogic layers. You have learned, right? The 5 sheets. So you are taking care of that, which is why it is called moving meditation. It is not aerobics. It is not some mechanical, it's not some fancy sequences that we build up. Everything has a specific reason for doing what we do. And to bring about certain cleansing effects in the mind also. Okay? So the first one is the ballistic stretching. The number 2 is the passive stretching. Like for example, using a belt or using your own body weight to get a stretch. Okay? Like for your Prasarita Padottanasana, you are putting your palms. You are using your palms to bring your spine into full flexion. No? So using your body also, you can do your passive stretching. This involves type of stretching uses the body weight, gravity. Yeah, gravity also can help you in your passive stretch. Okay, and using synergistic and agonistic muscle groups. So this is another thing that you need to know. So first you needed to know origin and insertion of muscle. Then another 2 terms that you need to know are agonist and antagonistic muscles. Okay, so you need to know that because the 2 of them have to work together. Holding passive stretches for longer periods lengthens the non-contractile elements of the muscle such as So when you hold a posture in a passive stretch, remember we talked about that fascia, that connective tissue which surrounds every muscle cell and muscle groups. So even that fascia which is not meant to stretch will lengthen in a passive stretch. So that is the advantage of holding a stretch for some time. All those latent body parts or tissues will also get activated. Then you have something called PNF, which we saw yesterday. We will go through it again today. PNF or facilitated stretching or proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. This type of stretching involves briefly contracting the muscle targeted for stretch. This action of contracting stimulates what is called the Golgi tendon organ stretch receptor, resulting in the spinal signaling the muscle to relax. The slack created by this response is taken up by deepening the stretch. So to get a better length in your leg muscle, first you tighten a specific muscle. By tightening, it sends neural signals to relax that part, and once you relax that part, you can further lengthen after a few seconds. Okay? Yeah, then he is also talking about in that box the chemicals which are released when you stretch, like we spoke about yesterday, the endorphins. That gives you a sense of relaxation and well-being that follows a yoga practice. Okay, now coming to important part, muscle spindle stretch receptor. Three types of nervous neuronal pathways take place when you are doing a stretch. Okay, so first type of neuronal pathway is called the muscle spindle stretch receptor. This is important. Okay, so the muscle spindle stretch receptor is a modified muscle cell located in the belly of all skeletal muscles. So see the diagram. Deep within your muscle cells, you have something called the muscle spindle stretch receptor. It detects changes in length and tension within the muscle. Basically, when a muscle stretches, the muscle spindle sends a signal to the spinal cord. Easy to understand. So these neuronal signals, the muscle spindle receptors are present deep within your muscle. When you are doing a stretch, signals are sent from the muscle spindle stretch receptors to the spinal cord, which then signals the muscle to contract. So this is the sensory nerve. What is the sensory nerve also called? Yeah. Afferent nerve. And then the signal, the other one is the effector or the efferent nerve, where the spinal cord sends the command to the muscle to contract. So motor nerve is also called the efferent nerve. So this is the pathway for your muscle spindle stretch receptor. It is very simple. You are trying to contract a muscle. Deep within the muscle, you have what is called muscle spindle stretch receptors, which send electrical impulses to the spinal cord saying, now we want to contract. So spinal cord says, okay, go ahead. So it sends electrical impulses, motor nerves, back to the muscle spindle, and that enables the muscle to contract. So this is called the very simple one. Okay. This mechanism, what else? It is called the spinal cord reflex arc. Okay. Then he says, never force what? Computer number, something else more useful. Never force the body into a stretch in yoga, because this intensifies the firing of the muscle spindle, causing the muscle to contract. So this muscle spindle basically causes contraction. It doesn't cause relaxation. So if you try to force your body to do one stretch, it will send warning signals saying don't stretch, tighten. So you have to ease yourself into, that's why we do first we bend the knee, we allow the muscle spindle to relax. Once the signals are not sent to the spinal cord, then you can wait for some time, then you can straighten the leg. Okay. The figure on the facing page illustrates the spinal cord reflex arc of the muscle spindle. Signal is sent from muscle spindle. I think it's easy to understand this one, right? Not difficult. This signal is then relayed to the motor nerve. So you have you have the muscle spindle, you have the sensory nerve or the afferent nerve, then you have spinal cord, then you have motor nerve or efferent nerve sending the signal back to the muscle spindle to contract. Now, holding a stretch, that's why we have to hold the stretch for 30 to 60 seconds so that all the signals can relax. This is a contracting signal. So once you stay there in that posture for 60 seconds, these signals will relax and you will be able to stretch. And this muscle spindle stretch receptor is what is used for I think it's used for a passive stretch.
Muscle spindle receptor.
Stretch receptor, yeah. Basically receptors which are sensitive to muscle contraction. So for example, one way you can do this is if you are working on a forward bend. So I am on page 84 now, where he is using the chair for Uttanasana. Now instead of trying to pull your back and bend forward, this would be a nice way to allow the muscle spindle stretch receptor to dampen. Signals will dampen if you transition into Uttanasana using a chair, Ardha Uttanasana. So you notice when you are doing Ardha Uttanasana, flat back and all that, the more you are able to lean forward and stretch, that will help you to go deeper in your forward bend. So that is like a transition phase where your spindle receptors, they relax. Okay? Carefully, muscle spindle in Uttanasana, carefully bend forward in Uttanasana until you feel a moderate stretch. Then the muscle spindles of hamstring, gluteus maximus, erector spinae will fire in response to this stretch and send a signal to the spinal cord. So, okay, it's the same thing, but he is saying, now he is mentioning what all muscles are involved in your forward bend, standing forward bend. Hamstrings, then the muscles of the buttocks, gluteus maximus, they are also stretching. Then your whole spinal group of muscles. So all of them are working to get you into Uttanasana. So you have two signals, right? First you have the outgoing signal to the spinal cord, then you have the incoming signal to the muscle spindle. The next step is to back off or dissolve reflex contraction of the stretch muscle by slightly relaxing the stretch. So don't go into your deepest forward bend right at the beginning. Give time for the nervous system to relax, basically. Chair Uttanasana is one way to acclimatize the muscle spindle for forward bends, since lifting the torso decreases the intensity of the stretch of the muscles of the back. So when you do chair Uttanasana, the back muscles are a little more relaxed. Even though your leg muscles and your buttock muscles are working, the back is not in tension. Hold this milder stretch for a few breaths This quietens the muscle spindle stretch receptors, interrupts their alarm. So you are not sending warning signals to the brain. Okay. So notice that by doing it like this, your mind also calms down quickly in a class. Rather than your intention to do a forward bend beautifully. Rather than that, if you give your body time and if you give your nervous system time, it will relax you better also. Your parasympathetic. So the true purpose of the class is what you set out to. You come here for relaxation, mental relaxation. That is achieved, even though you are sweating. Okay. So the summary of that was first contraction followed by contraction what he is saying is go into your milder stretch, then wait for a few seconds, then go deeper into your stretch. So that was the summary of that. Now you have what is called reciprocal inhibition. This is where you will have your antagonistic and agonist muscles, both will be working. In the previous one, only one muscle group, one type of muscle. Here, you will be working with opposing muscles. Yeah. The concept of balanced yin-yang appears throughout the body. It is present in anatomy where the form of a joint fits its function. Give me a minute. Okay, so the biomechanical yin-yang. Muscles fall into two basic groups depending on what we are doing at any given moment. For example, quadriceps are agonists. So whichever muscle you are targeting, that muscle is called the agonist. The muscle which works exactly the opposite of agonist is called the antagonist. For example, quadriceps are agonists for extending or straightening the knee. The hamstring along the back of thigh stretch when the knee extends, so they are the antagonists for this action. Conversely, the hamstrings become the agonist when you lift your leg. Okay, when you lift your leg, you are targeting the hamstring. So, and your antagonist becomes the quadricep. When you lift your leg, no, when you bend your knee and you do a lunge, this is tightening. You are targeting this, but this will relax. It will become longer. So depending on which muscle you are targeting, that muscle is called the agonist. Now coming to reciprocal inhibition, it makes sense that there would be a corresponding yin-yang to make biomechanical processes such as bending and straightening the knee energy efficient. That is, where the agonist muscle contracts, its antagonist relaxes. So if somebody asks you what is reciprocal inhibition, first sentence you say it is based on the concept of yin and yang biomechanics, based on the concept of the agonist and the antagonist muscles working together to produce a stretch. Okay? Then you elaborate. This exists as the primitive spinal cord reflex known as reciprocal inhibition, meaning that the muscle on one side of a joint relaxes to accommodate contraction on the other side of that joint. We can consciously access this reflex arc to deepen and improve our poses. If you see the picture, you will get a clearer idea. So he is doing the Paschimottanasana. Notice from that same point in the spinal cord, two different nerves. One for the antagonist muscle, one for the agonist muscle. So this is called your reciprocal inhibition. So without your consciously relaxing the antagonist muscle, it is happening by a neuronal pathway. Okay? Whether or not you want to relax the hamstring when you straighten the knee, it is happening. The moment you contract this, by the nervous signal sent from the spinal cord, this will necessarily relax. Okay? And then two more terms he has added. The nerve impulse which results in the contraction of the quadricep is called excitatory, and the nerve impulse to the hamstring is inhibitory. So to the agonist muscle you have excitatory impulses, to the antagonist muscle you have inhibitory impulses. So when you inhibit the impulses, when you dampen the impulses, you will have muscle lengthening, relaxation.
Those are inhibitory.
Yes. So for only when there is no nervous activity will a muscle relax. So that's another summary, right? So what does it mean? Again, your sympathetic, parasympathetic and all that. So only when you are mentally relaxed can you stretch better. Especially when you are doing that Hanuman asana or any other very deep stretch, it is important to not force. If you get nervous about it, it will definitely not happen. Muscles will tighten. Yeah. Try this technique to get a bit deeper in this pose by firmly contracting the quadricep to straighten the knee, and note how hamstring muscle. He is repeating the same thing, but it will, for understanding, better understanding. Apply it to different agonist, antagonist muscle groups in other poses. Okay. Just go through that picture. Okay, so examples of antagonistic muscles, if you want you can write down. Biceps and triceps, then gluteus maximus and hip flexor. Where is gluteus maximus? Oh, very good. Hip flexor here. Okay, then hamstrings and quadriceps. We have talked about it enough. Then pectoralis major and latissimus dorsi. Pectoralis major, front of the chest. Latissimus dorsi is a big muscle at the back, triangular muscle. Then calf muscle and shin. So calf muscle is called, yes, very good. And then the shin, the muscle here is called the tibialis anterior. Anterior. So these are two opposing muscles. Then also abductor and adductor. Adenadu abductor adductor. Last week
Abductor is moving away.
Howdu.
Abductor is
Howdu.
moving towards.
Yes, any muscle which pulls your arm away from the body or which pulls your leg away from the body is called an abductor. Good. Which brings the arm or the leg closer to the body is called the adductor. So these are all opposing muscles. Examples. Whenever you have a doubt now, just please look it up. Don't wait for that doubt to fester and become a bigger doubt, and then more doubts will gather. Okay, so this is the muscle on your back which is called the latissimus dorsi. And it works as an antagonist to your big chest muscle called the pectoralis major. So this is your latissimus dorsi. This one is trapezius. Yeah?
You do any pull exercise, they will
Yes, very good. Yeah. Okay, so this is about reciprocal inhibition. Now coming to the last one, which is the Golgi tendon organ.
You don't do a lot of pulling action in yoga, right? I mean, when we activate our
The
back.
pulling you do when you are doing, I think Chaturanga, when you pull forward and all that. Chaturanga. Little bit of pulling action is there.
But you mainly use the chest for Chaturanga.
Yeah. Also, you pull your arms, shoulders back when you are doing up dog and all that, right? Pulling
Or
back.
when you are interlocking your fingers also.
All the back bends, you have to retract your shoulder blades. You have to pull them back. Mainly Chaturanga, you are using these. You are pulling that. Called the serratus muscles. There is pulling going on there. Okay. Now the Golgi tendon organ, the last one, the last type of reflex arc, nervous reflex arc. It's a sensory receptor that is located where the muscle and tendon are joined. Now the difference between this and the first one, the muscle spindle stretch reflex. In the location also, muscle spindle stretch reflex is located in the belly of the muscle. Whereas this Golgi tendon organ is located where the muscle and the tendon join. So there you have a nervous reflex. Whereas in the first one, the receptor is present right within the muscle. Here the receptor is present where the muscle and the tendon meet. Not ligament, okay? There is no ligaments here in this nervous, ligament and nervous system, there is not much of connection. Okay? Now what happens is it detects changes in tension, and when tension increases, it signals the muscle to relax. What happened in the first case, you try to contract, and first you try to go into a stretch, and then signals are sent to the brain, to the spinal cord to contract. Once those signals dampen, then you are able to go deeper. Now in this case, what is happening is, when the tension increases, signals are sent to the muscle to relax. So automatically signals are sent to relax. So you can go deeper. Whereas the first one was more of a protective mechanism. Interesting, no? So that's why you had to, in the first case, you had to wait for the protective mechanism to come down, to dampen, before you go deeper. Whereas here, you are already getting into a deep stretch. It is helping you to go deeper. So when tension is felt in the muscle, signals are sent to relax the muscle.
Does it have the same arc, like does it go to spinal cord?
Oh yeah, there's always spinal cord. Spinal cord is the main factor in all the three reflexes. Only the origin is different, right? In the first case, it was right within the belly of the muscle. In the second case, it is from the antagonist and the agonist muscle. In this case, it is at the junction of the muscle and the tendon. Okay, simple, no? Yeah. Now, what your challenge will be to put all this into words. Okay, so try to crunch all this. Now, page after page of all this data, just try to put one para madbidi. Okay. And this is the technique, this is the muscle, this is the nervous reflex arc, that pathway that takes place when you are doing that PNF stretching. So in PNF, we temporarily contract a target muscle that we are stretching in order to stimulate the Golgi tendon organ. So you purposefully you will contract the muscle so that it will stretch by triggering the Golgi tendon organ. This Golgi tendon organ then signals the muscle to relax. This creates slack. Slack means what? Loosening, relaxation, lengthening, blah blah. That we can then take up by going deeper into the stretch. This is known in physiology as a relaxation response. So you can use this technique to go deeper and deeper into stretches. Whereas the first mechanism is for a beginner level. Forward bend, where we use the muscle spindle stretch receptor. This may seem counterintuitive at first, contracting a muscle that we are trying to stretch. However, when we carefully apply this technique, when applied carefully, this technique can be used to dissolve blocks and deepen poses. To understand this technique, we will look at lengthening the hamstring in Janu Shirshasana. This technique is generally applied as follows. First, take the muscle out to length. Take it out to your normal length. Suppose I am just sitting like this with my legs straight. This is my normal thing. Now I want to go deeper. This is a set length. This is the basic length. Next, contract the target muscle. In this case, we are focusing on the hamstring of the straight leg. So we attempt to bend the knee. How to contract the hamstring? Easiest way is to bend the knee. Okay? To create a contraction of the hamstring, I generally access this by slightly bending the knee and pressing the heel into the floor. So that's a very important point, okay? Because when I just lift my knee, I am not feeling any stretch or tightening here. But when I press my heel down, I feel the tightening here. So two things you have to initiate: bending the knee and pushing the heel down. This will activate the hamstring. And contract the muscle to no more than 20% of its maximum force and hold this for 8 to 10 seconds. Then relax for one breath. Now contract the antagonist muscle at the front of the thigh. Okay, easy, no? So first you tighten the hamstring, hold it for some time and tighten not more than 20% of the maximum force. Hold it for 8 to 10 seconds. Then relax it for one breath. Then tighten the opposite muscle, the opposing muscle. to take the target muscle to a new set length. So you are resetting the length of your leg, basically. Okay, so this is the Golgi tendon organ reflex mechanism. Golgi tendon organ sensing tension at. So so when you bend the knee, signals are sent from the hamstring to the spinal cord, giving a signal for the muscle to relax in response to the inhibitory impulse. Remember that Golgi tendon organ is there to protect the tendon from injury, but its ability to protect the tendon has limits. So since this causes deep stretches, you have to be careful to not stretch beyond limits, because otherwise the signals will be sent to keep stretching and you may injure your tendon. Okay, so be careful. And then he is also giving you how to do it. One important thing is, if you experience joint pain, then you back off. Joint pain means where will you feel?
The knee.
Okay,
Or
knee.
back also you can feel if you stretch more. If you
Maybe.
lower
Okay.
back pain.
Okay.
There also.
Ankles.
Okay. Have you felt ankle pain anytime? I'm just curious.
Like post my injury, I got
Ankle pain.
when I used to practice.
What injury was that?
While playing football, I got a bad ankle injury once. For about 1 year, I had like crackling of ankle each time I do forward bend.
Yeah.
So I lost a little stability due to that.
If you do a deep hip flexion, sometimes you'll feel it in the hip crease.
Yeah.
And then shoulder you can feel, because they are all delicate. So if you feel any tension, any pain, sharp pain around any of these major joints, you can stop. Deep lunges and deep, all that, and then, when you are doing arm balances, if you feel anything sharp, you can back off. Or when you are doing a lot of back bending where you need to do shoulder opening and all that, keep retracting shoulders, sometimes it pains, so you back off. Okay. And then in the same place, under precautions, he says, focus on one muscle group at a time and limit your PNF stretching to one pose in a practice session. So this technique, in one class, you apply it for one particular posture. That's enough. So we're trying to straighten the leg, just use this technique and don't do it more than 3 times, and give breaks, time periods with intervals between each round.
Can the PNF stretching apply to hands and other parts of the body, back? Or is it really mainly for legs?
I think it's legs. Which are the areas which are, because this area is one stubborn area, no? This hamstring area. Where else can you apply PNF stretching?
Side bend.
Okay, back off. Forward bends you can apply, no? PNF.
Forward bend.
Forward bending you can apply. Slightly bend the knees, then go down. Then straighten the knees. When you want to do your Pada Hastasana, palms below the feet. Slightly bend the knees, elbows pointing outwards. Then you exhale out deeply. Then you can straighten the knees, all that. So, okay. Want to do a deep forward, standing forward bends. Side bends also. When you are doing a Trikonasana, you can slightly bend the front leg. This will give, instead of fully straight, some people tend to bend the front leg in Trikonasana. So that's okay. Then you get a nice side lengthening of the spine. Then you can, once you have got your full length, then you can straighten the knee.
What is the mechanism for the balancing asanas? how is the mind signaling to the part of the body to balance?
No, that is actually, it is nothing. It is still anatomy only. So don't think that if you cannot balance, then your mind is wandering too much. It's not that. So the basic thing balancing is you have to press, the 3 points of the foot, they say. So you have to, when you are balancing on one leg, you have to press into the ball of the big toe, then press into the ball of the little toe, and press into the heel. So these are the 3 points, triangle, which forms a base for your body. And from there you lift your leg up. And then from there the other leg will rise up. There is also core involved in balancing. Apart from foot and leg, core is engaged in standing balancing poses, of course. Vrikshasana, you engage core. Warrior 3, you have to engage the core. Padangusthasana for sure. Maybe Garudasana, not so much.
You use your core. You
Little
squeeze
bit,
your
yeah, you
core.
have to tighten your belly, all that is there.
Squeeze your core.
Yes, little bit, yeah, anyway your thighs and all that, the way you close your hips, it will engage your core also. Balance is about foot, sole of the foot, then inner thigh, then core.
And also glutes, I think, when you squeeze
A little bit, yes, glutes also, yeah. So again that is coming to little bit core only. What is core muscle mean? It's actually various muscle groups around the front and around your midsection. It's not just this, it's the whole front, sides and back, below the waist. It acts as a corset. Okay, imagine you are wearing a very tight broad belt. So that is your core. So allow ample time for recovery before repeating this technique. Oh, okay. So that's what, 48 hours you give, that's what he's saying. Before you do the same posture again with the PNF technique. And always practice under guidance of an experienced person. And some examples he has explained in regarding Golgi tendon organ and facilitated stretching. Okay, so when you are doing Gomukhasana, attempting to pull the hands apart in Gomukhasana increases the tension at the muscle tendon junctions of the upper extremities. This affects the muscle tendon junctions of the infraspinatus teres muscles of the rotator cuff as well as trunk portions, blah blah. In the upper arm of the pose, the increased tension is felt at the, this firing of Golgi tendon organ. So what you are doing is, this firing of the Golgi tendon organ in response to this tension results in spinal cord signaling these muscles to relax. This relaxation response persists for a brief period even after release of tension created by pulling the hands apart. Pose then can be deepened by moving the hands closer together. So first you pull your hands apart. This will send the signals to the Golgi tendon organ. Okay, and then you wait for some time. You wait, first you keep your hands like this in Gomukhasana, then wait for the signals to quieten, then you will be slowly able to bring your hands closer. That's what he's saying. And all the muscles around your shoulder, your upper arm, your upper back, all these muscles will get activated by this clasping of the hands like this. So don't start right at the beginning grabbing hold of the palm and all that. First you start with the easy one, then wait here for 10 seconds, then you go deeper.
Ma'am, I have to mute him.
Sure, go ahead. It's almost over. Okay, then next one was the when you do this variation of Rajakapotasana. Yeah, here you can see clearly the picture of the psoas muscle, which originates from the lower back. This is the psoas muscle. Psoas is a flexor of the hip and has been isolated in this illustration. The hip is taken, so notice that the back hip is taken into extension, you know that much, right? So what is happening to the pelvis? Posterior tilt of the pelvis.
Posterior.
Okay?
Anterior is moving inwards.
Yes, moving forward and downwards.
Forward, okay.
To tilt forward, to go into a forward bend.
This is down and back is...
See, when you go into a standing forward bend, the pelvis or the hip slightly goes up and then tilts forward, like a waterfall.
Correct.
So that is called the anterior tilt of the pelvis. Whereas in a back bend, you are taking the hip back. Okay, so attempting to drag the back knee towards the front foot. Okay, understand this. Attempting to drag the back knee towards the front foot causes the stretched psoas to contract, stimulating the Golgi tendon organ at the. So this is how you initiate this posture. Don't start by keeping your back knee far back, is what he is trying to say. Keep it at a medium stance. So here when you are doing this kind of a lunging posture, it is important the distance between the knee and the front foot. So he is saying first when you stay in this position, consciously try to bring the two together. The front knee to the, the back knee to the front foot. This will stimulate that Golgi tendon organ reflex. It will stimulate this muscle to contract.
The back.
Yes, that psoas muscle. The psoas muscle is called a hip flexor. Okay. The front foot is fixed, so the force of contraction is transmitted to the back leg psoas, increasing the firing of the Golgi tendon organ. Easy. Front foot you do not move it at all. But what you should do is you should try to pull the back knee towards the front foot. This creates tension in the muscle of the back thigh. The slack in the flexor group is then taken up by deepening the pose. So once you tighten that and then wait for some time, then you will be able to sink in the pose. Activating the front leg psoas. When you activate the front leg psoas, what will happen? This hip crease will deepen. You will be able to go deep into a lunge. While the hamstrings bend the knee, pressing down on the front knee with the hands lifts the trunk. All of these actions deepen the pose and lengthen the hip flexor of the back leg. Okay, so step 1 will be to fix your front foot. Step 2 will be to attempt to pull the knee of the back leg towards the front foot. Then step 3 will be to activate the front leg hip flexor by going a little deeper. Then using your hand to push the knee down. All these actions deepen the pose and lengthen the hip flexor of the back leg. The back leg hip flexor is what we are targeting. Then combining biomechanics and physiology in stretching, page 88. Here we use Janu Shirshasana to illustrate the stretching and stretching the hamstrings by moving their origins and insertions in combination with techniques we have gained from knowledge of muscle spindle, reciprocal inhibition. So in the last example, this page 88, right, for you, he is combining how you can combine all these three muscle, whatever the nervous receptor, the pathways, how you can combine what is that? Reciprocal inhibition. Then the first one, what is that? The Golgi tendon organ. No, the third one is Golgi tendon organ, muscle spindle stretch. How to apply all these neuronal pathways to get a good stretch. Okay. So Adhanali, step 1. First do a moderate stretch. Okay, you can underline that. Take the general form of the pose, apply a moderate stretch to the hamstring. This stimulates what? Muscle spindle. Okay, this would be important, guys. It's a lot of information downloading and it's a lot to digest also. So step 1 would be just do a general stretch. This will stimulate your muscle spindle stretch reflex, causing contraction of the hamstring. Okay. Then bend the knee to lighten the stretch of the hamstring. Step 2. Releasing the insertion of the lower leg. Hold this relaxed position for 2 to 3 breaths as the muscle spindle accommodates the lighter stretch. So step 2 will be bending the knee to release the insertion of the lower leg. Then note that number 3, note that the firing of the muscle spindle has now decreased. Okay, so the first neuronal pathway has now relaxed. Contract the quadricep to straighten the knee and draw the hamstring out to length, moving the insertion at the knee away from the origin. So now you are using reciprocal inhibition. Aita, first step, come to a general length. Do your general stretch. This will initiate your muscle spindle reflex. Then step 2, bend the knee. This will relax the calf muscle where it attaches. And then step 3, you tighten the quadricep. So now reciprocal inhibition is firing. Then next, fourth step is press the heel into the ground by contracting the hamstring. Now you are stimulating your Golgi tendon. This increases tension at the muscle tendon junction and stimulates Golgi tendon organ to fire. I would say that this would be the gist of your whole stretching, this page. And number 5, contract. So step 4 would be to dig the heel into the ground to start firing your Golgi tendon. Then contract the quadricep to straighten the knee to get a new length to the leg. Any doubts here? So this is the gist of your chapter. This itself, you can write it in a flow chart. All 3 neuronal pathways are in this and in the sequence. First sequence would be the muscle spindle stretch receptor firing, and that will dampen. Then reciprocal inhibition will start firing, that will dampen. Then lastly is your Golgi tendon body for the final length of the leg. Okay, this is your chapter. Okay. Then he is recapitulating by saying muscles, origin, insertion, agonist, antagonist, synergist. What is synergist? Synergist is a muscle which helps your agonist.
It's not antagonist.
No. You have 3 types, Appa. You have agonist. Agonist help madlike. You have synergist.
Okay.
A lesser muscle. A synergist is a muscle which helps an agonist. So you have agonist and synergist, and working against that is the antagonist. Okay, so this is your chapter. So what did we understand? PNF stretching is a slightly advanced stretching. Therefore. So to be done towards the end. So PNF stretching you can do after you have finished your vinyasa. First you do a vinyasa based on hamstring and stretching and length and leg and all that, with forward bends, everything. Then before you do your cool down, as a peak pose, you can do PNF stretching with Paschimottanasana or Hanumanasana.
Hanuman, Purna Hanuman.
Yes, full Hanuman. Using this PNF technique.
Yeah.
Okay, so that
But
would
it is a PNF itself, right? When you are in your complete split, it is a PNF.
still you will do slight bending of the knee and all that, no? slight bending of the knee, then you will lengthen, take it to full length.
Got it.
And above and over all this, muscles will take care to a certain extent. Your mental awareness is what is really important. That's it. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thank you.
Top titles and then
Oh, right.
so
We'll go to gentle yoga.